Welcome to the Existence Project podcast, where we share stories from our Keeping It Human workshops and hope to prove that community can be founded on connection, dignity, and belonging for all, where everyone's story is heard. Today we hear from Ewan, an addictions counselor with Homewood Health, who has transformed his own experience of addiction into a passion-fueled career. His story proves that a steady childhood is not the only prerequisite to a healthy life, and that addiction is a physiological disease to be treated, not the result of being a bad person. He drives home the importance of a strong community and personal sense of self-compassion, something he views as vital to the recovery of people affected by this condition.
Hello, my name is Ewan, and this is my story. I was born in Victoria and grew up in Gordon Head. I had the privilege of growing up in a loving household. My mom and dad are still together. I have a younger sister. And growing up was pretty good. I got to play sports and go to school. We even got to go to Disneyland. And, no complaints on the outside. It was a good life. But when I look back, though it just seemed normal for me at the time, I had nothing to compare it to. What I've come to realize is that I lived a life of fear. Growing up, I was always afraid. I always felt different and separate from. I was raised with solid values and morals, but I had trouble acting within those. I could put on a brave face for the people that were watching me, the people that mattered, but my actions below were selfish and self-centered. I was a liar and a cheat and a thief. And I never felt like I belonged. I had friends and I was connected, but I don't know, it always felt off. It felt like I missed that day when they handed out the kind of the how-to life guide at school. I was sick that day. And it was always a challenge. And I didn't know any different, so that was just sort of my existence for a long time. And then when I was 13, I had the opportunity to try drinking and drugs. And up to that point, I'd always said no. I was the say no to drugs generation, and that made a lot of sense to me. Why would you want to do that? And I said no right up until I said yes. And when I said yes, everything changed. It reminded me of that moment in Wizard of Oz where everything's black and white. And when I got loaded for the first time, it was like stepping into Technicolor. I felt like I had arrived. I felt like that manual to life had finally come in the mail. And I felt like I belonged for the first time. And immediately it became the most important thing in my life. I didn't use very often. And what I realized was that it was really important for me to keep up appearances in the rest of my life. That's where my life kind of split into two pieces. It was the front, going to school, being a good son, playing sports, and then the other side, which was the using, and it didn't happen very often, but as soon as I finished, the next day I was planning for the next time. And I lived that way, from 13 right up till when I was graduating, and I was able to keep it together. I was able to keep it secret and keep it hidden. And I didn't know what I was going to do. A lot of my friends were going off to university or maybe getting a job, and I really didn't know what to do. And I had the opportunity to go overseas, and so I left. I went over to England for a year, and nobody knew me over there. It was great. I could kind of reinvent myself, and I really fit in with the drinking culture over there. And my substance use flourished. And, those traits that I had that went against my values kind of did whatever I had to get loaded and stay loaded over there. And life had been pretty easy up until that point, and I was over there working in a college for physically disabled people. And some of the guys I was working with who were my age had terminal illnesses, terminal diseases. And their disabilities were going to kill them pretty quickly. And as I was working so closely with these guys, they started to die. And I didn't know what to do with those feelings. I was away from home and away from support, and it just started to use more and more. Um, After that year, I went back to Victoria, and I started at UVic, a year behind most of my friends, and I didn't really know what I was doing there. I started in pre-med and then maybe a little psychology, European political science. But the most important thing to me was using, and I started to use more in different things. Any substance I could get my hands on, I tried. And I eventually I fell away from school, and I fell away from even the work that I was doing, and my life was just about drugs and alcohol. And I got hooked on meth and heroin, and I was using those and anything else I could daily. And in order to provide for myself, I started to do whatever it took, and that took me to some dark places. I was kind of recruited to live a life of crime and do whatever it took to get and stay high, and that's what I did. I pushed everyone in my life away, my healthy friends and my family. I pushed everybody away in pursuit of what had become my addiction. And those values and morals that I was instilled with growing up, all of them went out the window. I crossed all of them in pursuit of using. I started to, anyone that crossed my path would suffer if they got between me and my substances, or if I thought that I could use them in some way to get high. I did that. And that carried on to the bitter ends. I was in and out of hospital, contact with police, charges, violence around me, some really traumatic experiences. All of that stuff started to really take its toll. And, at 23 years of age, I figured if I made it to 25, that would be pretty good. The people around me didn't seem like they were going to live too much longer than that. And I knew that the writing was on the wall. And, I had distanced myself from my family, but I had a meeting with my parents and a drug and alcohol counselor, and under the pretense of me trying to manipulate them and get some help so I could get back using. And instead, it was an intervention, and I had the opportunity to go to treatment. I didn't have any idea what that was or what that would look like, but they caught me off guard that day. And for the first time, I saw the impact that my behavior was having on my parents. I wasn't just killing myself, but I was killing them too. And for whatever reason, that mattered to me that day. And so I took up the offer and I went to treatment. I was in there for 5.5 months, and I learned some important things there. One of the first things I learned was that I was sick. I wasn't a bad person, I was a sick person. And I felt terrible about the things that I had done. And somebody said, good, it's good that you feel terrible, because a bad person wouldn't feel bad about doing bad things because it would be in line with their values. If you feel bad about the things you've done, that must mean that you're a good person because it wasn't in line with your values. And that struck me, and the other part, learning that this was an illness, that addiction was a disease, that I was a sick person and I could get well. I don't know if you could cure being bad, but I knew about, that sick people could get well. And it was in treatment that I was introduced to a 12-step program, and I wasn't a very, spiritual person, and the word God was all over it, and I was pretty suspect. But, there's some real academic people, some counselors and things who could explain how it was actually a very scientific approach to getting well. And, I was a fan of science, and I gave it a shot, and I started to see the rewards. I started to see the benefits. I started to stay clean a day at a time. I started to be able to live within my values and my beliefs again, and I started to get some freedom from that empty hole inside of me that I thought I could only fill with drugs. Things started to get better. I remember, we used to have to go for a walk in the neighborhood in treatment, and with our little reflective armbands, and remember seeing the sunset for the first time one night. I remember hearing the birds one day. And it's not like those things hadn't been happening, but just my ability to see them and hear them and be a part of reality again started to take hold, started to integrate slowly back into society. And for the first time, I didn't feel like such an outsider. I felt like I maybe belonged there. So after 5.5 months in treatment, I wanted to come home and live in Victoria, but I came home for a couple of trips and it wasn't a good idea. So I stayed up in Nanaimo and I got a job doing sheet metal work. And I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do, but my head was still pretty scrambled, and it was a good, honest, legal job. A job that kept me out of trouble. I had to work pretty hard, so I was pretty tired at the end of the day. And that was good for me. And I kept up my work in the 12-step program. I kept going because what I learned was that addiction was a chronic illness. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not going to disappear on its own. And like any other chronic illness, it needs to be consistently managed. And that's what that program allowed me to do, was consistently look after my illness a day at a time. When I did that, I stayed clean a day at a time. I'd been using for 10 years. And suddenly I wasn't. The time was starting to add up. And I kept working on myself and getting healthier and getting better and started to build a life. I started to get back to some of my passions and hobbies. Started to play soccer again and really enjoy that. Got to meet people and build friendships and relationships. And life started to get good again. I was rebuilding relationships with my family. Started to enjoy a life worth living, a life free of addiction. And as the years passed up there, I met a girl and I had good friends and started to get some of those life things back, and things were pretty good, And then in a very short period of time, my best friend relapsed and tried to kill himself, and my girlfriend left me, and my car got stolen, and I got laid off from my job. Another friend of mine got stabbed, and it all happened in a really short period of time. And it was tough. It brought up a lot of the trauma that I had experienced in addiction. But the neat thing was that I didn't feel like I needed to get loaded over that. And, I was able to connect with my recovery support and stay clean. And after 4 years of sheet metal, I decided I wanted to go back to school. And so, as I'd always liked rocks and crystals, sometimes a little too much. But I decided to go back to school for geology, and so I started that process. And to continue, I needed to move back to Victoria, and so that's what I did. And I went back to UVic. I sat in chemistry, calculus, and physics, and immediately I knew it wasn't where I was supposed to be. It had been too long. I struggled in those subjects at the best of times, and I didn't want to do that. And it was tough because I felt like a bit of a failure, but again, it was something that I could get through, and I started to explore other options. Maybe I thought about going back to sheet metal. And a friend of mine had just come through unhoused, and he said, listen, you're pretty good. You're pretty good with people. Why don't you consider working here? And that was a big change for me, because I remember sitting in treatment and everyone was talking about, hey, this is pretty cool. Maybe I'm going to become an addiction counselor. And I always said, I'm never going to do that. I don't like people. That doesn't sound very fun. I need the help. I don't want to help anybody else. And when I got presented with this opportunity to give back and work at Anawim House, I'd done enough work on myself that, I didn't hate myself anymore. I actually, I'd grown to quite like and even love myself. And once I could say that about myself, I was in a place to start to give back to other people. And so I started to work at Anawim House, and I started to be able to help people and make a difference. And I saw myself making a difference for some people there. I had an ability to connect, and people respected that that I got what it was like, living that day-to-day existence on the streets of Victoria, trying to stay one step ahead of the police and with enough money to stay high and have a roof over my head. Like I'd struggled on that grind before, and people, I could relate to that, whether it was about drugs or not, and my experience was helping people. And I started to work at Kool-Aid as well. And what I saw was that, I had an ability to help there, but I wanted to do more. And so I went back to school. I went back to UVic, and I got my social work degree, and I started to build up a life again in Victoria. And I met a girl, and we moved in together, and we really started to travel and enjoy life, and bought a house together and got the cat and the dog. And I finished school, and I was able to do a practicum with the organization where I went to treatment, and then I did another practicum with another organization, and I had the opportunity to become an addiction counselor in a residential treatment facility. The one thing that I said I wasn't going to do. And I had that opportunity, and I had the opportunity to make a difference for people the same way that others had made a difference for me. And I knew that what was at stake here, because in treatment, not only did they save my life, but they gave me an opportunity to have a life, a second chance. And I could start to give back in that way. And so I did. I started to give back like that, and it was really hard work. It was draining work, but I loved doing it, and doing that work just made me have to work that much harder to look after myself, and I continued my attendance in 12-step recovery, and I could help and give back to people in that form. I was exercising and really had a pretty balanced experience, pretty balanced life for a while, and then it's strange because as things come, then they seem to change and get taken away. And I had that experience again in a short period of time. My partner made some decisions and decided to go back to using drugs, and that just wasn't going to work for me. It wasn't safe for me to be around that, and so we had to split up and had to sell the house. And at the same time, some changes happened in my workplace, and I knew that I couldn't work there anymore. And I left that job without anything else really in place. And again, it was a challenge, but I leaned on the support, the friends that I'd made, and the people in my life to get through that. And I knew I didn't have to get loaded. I knew that I could stay clean, and I knew that I could thrive through that experience. And one thing that in the work that I'd done on myself, I realized that, life happens, things happen. They don't happen to me. It's not personal. It's not an attack on me. It's just life happening. And that selfish, self-centered part of my disease wants me to take it to a place of guilt and shame and take it to a place of me being a victim. And when I can step outside of that and realize that it's just happening, I had a lot more freedom. And I could move through that period with more grace. And when that stuff was happening, I remember reaching out to an integral part of my support, and the first thing he said was, don't do anything that you're going to regret. Don't do anything you have to apologize for. And I used that as a mantra to get through that challenging time. And I got through that time, and it was a challenging but beautiful experience. And when things like that, when there are gaps in my life, space is created in my life, what I know is that it opens up an opportunity for something better. And so I started to do some work back in Victoria, some freelance work, some contract work, and I got to work for a bunch of different organizations. And the neat thing was I didn't have to look for any of that work. People came to me. They asked me. I was sought out. I didn't have to. Since I become a social worker and an addiction counselor, I haven't had to use my resume to get a job. I haven't even had to look. People have come to me, and that feels pretty good. Or if I've seen an opportunity, I just show up and say, hey, I think I could do this, and people are more than willing to take me on board. And so, that feels different than in my active addiction where, people didn't even want me in their house, or they would always be watching me, and I couldn't be trusted. And I think right now I have 4 different sets of keys for 4 different businesses where I work as a counselor. So that's a pretty neat change. And today my life is amazing. Over the last year, I've had the opportunity to go out to Ontario for 3 months and do some training at a really expert facility, and I've been hired to start in April at the new Homewood Ravensview facility as a counselor out there, working at really the top of my field. I'm very honored to have that opportunity. This year I've driven across the country. I've gone to Seattle. I have been able to go to Scotland and share my experience at a convention for people in recovery. I have traveled to Costa Rica a few times. I'm actually going there again this week. And, I love to travel. And that's something that I get to do because I'm clean and I'm healthy. And I've met somebody new, and we've been living together for a while, and we're on the same page. I get to share my life with someone who gets where I'm coming from. I have a job where I can give back and help people. And really today it's about balance for me. I try and exercise. I spend time with friends. I like to run, go to the gym, get sleep. I can eat healthy. I really enjoy food. I eat out. I get to explore new restaurants. I really enjoy music. I've been able to go to music festivals, in multiple locations in North America. I've been able to see, all of my favorite artists. I've been able to go to the Stanley Cup Finals in Vancouver, the Under-20 World Cup. Now that I'm clean, if I have a dream, it's just a matter of time. If I'm willing to put the energy in, then I get it done. I used to sit on the couch when I was high, dreaming of things and take no action and get no results. And today, I have the opportunity to do that. And I continue to push myself. And one area that I really wanted to explore was the concept of spirituality and connection. And so over the last 18 months or so, I've taken 2 opportunities to sit down and do a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and that has transformed my ability to relax and focus and stay centered and control my mind and my mood. And that's something that I would never even consider. But this journey in recovery has given me the tools and the opportunity to continue to grow and evolve as a person. And that's all I really wanted, was a chance to continue to challenge myself and tackle life. And that's the opportunity that's been given to me through recovery. So thank you.
You've been listening to the Existence Project podcast. If you want to hear more, check out our website, theexistenceproject.ca, or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Existence Project.